also the reading list. If you want to keep up with that'll be mailed out or emailed out this week as well. But if you want to pick one up before you go, so we can all kind of read some similar things. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the things we say, especially, I'll be honest, I was a political theory major in college, so as I watch politics and stuff, it makes me incredibly aware of the things that are said. That words can be uplifting, encouraging, or damaging and separating. And we're going to see more and more of that over the next few months. So I want us to be aware of what we're saying. And the other thing that brought this to mind is, have you ever watched a British reality show versus an American reality show? Yeah. There's two different shows I was thinking of. One, of course, is the Great British Baking Show. Any of you watch that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 10. Okay. I love that show because it's just so... There's no $1 million prize. I think they get a cake plate. And they help each other out. If someone's having a bad time, they'll run over. They're not sabotaging each other. If it was an American one, they'd be like sabotaging each other's cooking. The show I was thinking about is Chopped. Have you ever seen Chopped? The kids were really into that. That was on the Food Channel for a while. And they give them weird ingredients and they have to make up a 3-course menu. And that's the one where they're usually kind of denigrating the other side and puffing themselves up. It's very American type thing. But Great British Baking Show is just so low-key, and they're all cheering for each other. And when someone is asked to leave, they're all crying and hugging. It's good for my soul to watch that show. The other one is, have you ever watched, it's a little show, I don't know if you've known it, called House Hunters. Like, they have the American, Looking for House, and then they have House Hunters International. And the idea is, and it's only been on for like 93 seasons. It's been on since Little House on the Prairie. But the idea is they're going around, and the way people talk about it, there's irritating things about it. One of them is, sometimes people complain, they're shown 3 houses and they pick one that they want to move into. When people complain about the color, is always my favorite. You can paint it. It's not that hard. Everybody does that. And they just pick apart, they go in and they pick apart every little detail of these beautiful homes that have been made and staged for them, and they find all sorts of things wrong. And their attitude is a little bit like, I guess we'll settle for this one if we have to. Or they'll find some little tiny problem and really be complaining about it. Like, it's 15 minutes further from where I wanted to, from my work, than this other house. Another show, if that begins to bother you, here's an antidote. There's a show on BBC called Escape to the Country. Have any of you seen this show? Yes. Okay, good. All right, you guys are fitting in already. Man, you're my go-to this morning.
I love that show.
Oh, I'm getting goosebumps about how much we love it. Escape to the Country is just like it sounds. There's somebody who's living in a city who wants to move to the Cotswolds or somewhere, in Wales with not a vowel in the name. And they're these adorable homes, and at the end of it, they kind of look at 3 little houses, and they may or may not buy one, and they talk about, inevitably, they just talk about how wonderful each place is, and how wonderful the community is, and how wonderful the landscaping and the garden is, and the house, and just all the good stuff. And sometimes the worst they might say is, it's really not to my taste. It's about the worst thing you'll hear. And there's no pressure. At the end, they're like, yeah, we're going to keep looking. And sometimes it's huge. We get excited. My wife and I really get excited when they say, we're going to make an offer on this one. We're like, oh, this was a winner. We love it. And the idea is that the words change the tenor of the whole experience. Just the things, the casual conversations as they're doing it. That if you really want to know how words can be good or bad, and I don't recommend this, but occasionally, if you really need to kind of see what the temperature of the country is, look in the comments section on any social media. Someone will say something innocuous like, my cat turned 9 today. And then the next person will be like, that cat should be put to sleep. It's probably suffering. And someone else will say, you're letting your cat outside? That's bad for the environment and for your cats. And yeah, but what about dogs? Don't you like dogs? Like, that's the way the comments go. And people just immediately go to this negative. We need to shake off this idea of, we need to be careful of the words that we say, that we type, that we listen to, and how we communicate. I think when I was a kid, I was mainly concerned about bad words being swears. But it's so much more. So the first point is bad words. What does Scripture say about bad words? What does God think? What does Jesus say about bad words? and not just swears. Bad words. This is when we say anything that is contrary to the character and the growth that Jesus offers us. When we begin to communicate, not just the words, but the tenor and the meaning and the point, if it's anything other than what Christ is wanting us to grow into. And we're really looking at a couple of passages. We're looking at 3 different passages, but really it's 2 and then a little bit of an additional one. Usually I don't jump around like this, but I love these ones. So the first one is just the first part of Ephesians 4. Ephesians 4:29a says this: don't use foul or abusive language. Now again, that was one that I grew up thinking was don't say swears. Now you could define swears all sorts of ways. When you're little, one of my favorite stories is I think it's a children's story, young adult story, where the little girl wants to swear and she says guts, 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 guts. That's the worst word she can imagine. My mom and her older brother played a joke on their little brother that they made him think that the word plum was the dirtiest word you could say. And so he got really mad one time and said, "Oh, plum!" And everyone's like, "What are you talking about? That is odd." But it's so much more than that. Foul. Don't use foul language, anything unwholesome or rotten. When something goes foul, when something you say, "I smell something foul," it is that horrible, rotten, repugnant smell. It's like, he says, don't say something foul. It's like bad breath. It comes from when you ate something bad. It's roiling inside you and comes out like a gross, bad fume. These words and the foul things we say come from a roiling dissatisfaction with life and our gross insides that want what we cannot have. They are mean. They are words that are mean and meant to damage and pollute and destroy, and often used as a weapon. Foul language is rotting, decaying language meant to hurt and to cause discomfort to others. And then that leads to the next notch up, abusive language. Don't use abusive language. Habitual cruelty. Abuse is just constantly being cruel to somebody or to everybody. Words that are directed at or about somebody or a group of somebody's that are meant and known to hurt, to belittle, or to rob of dignity. Man, this is where some of the words that are used about, especially I was thinking about this, some of the words that are used about groups, those slangs that we don't say anymore, those are meant to rob dignity and to damage and to hurt. That is abusive, to keep them. Little cruelties, sometimes big cruelties and sometimes minor cruelties that just deflate and hurt and tear down. Slurs or casual put downs. How many times has somebody said something really hurtful and they think they get off the hook because they go, "I was only joking. I was joking," right? Derogatory nicknames, highlighting flaws or weaknesses in order to embarrass or demean. It's habitual, consistent cruelty. That's abusive. And words. I like that. I was breaking down this verse, that it's language. Words. What we're meant to communicate is that we use words because we're trying to get what's in my brain into your brain. And we can't hook up a little... I've lost you now. Zinni is adorable. Anyway, sorry. I'm going to keep going. We try and take the ideas from our brain. We can't plug a cable into your brain and my brain and send an idea straight across. We have to describe and use words. I want to get out of my head something into your head. And bad words are ones that there's something bad going on in my brain, something bad going in myself, something bad going in my mind. And my whole goal is to somehow pollute your brain with it. And those words, whether they are swears, or whether they're slurs, or whether they're just mean, small, constant cruelties, are communicating something other than we should be. They reveal our heart, they reveal our worldview, and they reveal our thoughts. And often, unfortunately, is foul or abusive. A little further on, part of Ephesians 31, or 4:31. Get rid of all bitterness and rage and anger and harsh words and slander, as well as all types of evil behavior. Bitterness, we communicate bitterness so often. Something bad happened to us, and we just love to rehash it and talk about it and wallow in it. The resentment of life is our bitterness. And we communicate our disappointment and our dissatisfaction with the world. And I think that shows inside of us a lack of faith or a lack of confidence in God. Something we don't like and we've held on to it, and we resent the world being the way it is and not the way I want, and we continually communicate that. We want everyone to know that it isn't great and the pain that is inside us. And often it's because we have decided to pin the blame for that on someone or someone's. A business, a family member, a group of people. Politics does this a lot. One of the things we learned about in populism when I was studying in college, that politics, if you can blame a difficulty or a danger or a pain on a group or another person, we can somehow make those two groups fight and leave the people you're trying to distract alone, the people who are actually in power. We blame our difficulty often on someone weaker or someone marginalized. And instead of helping, instead of solving, we can get away with just making them afraid or angry at somebody else. Pitting people against each other in order to garner support, get them on your side. And they spew, not just in politics, but all over life, we spew bitterness and we cultivate bitterness sometimes with our words. And then that goes into rage. That turns into rage and anger. Displeasure leading to hostility or violence. I love that definition. Anger is displeasure leading to hostility and violence. And rage is anger unleashed. I've heard this often when talking about society today. We live in an angry world. So quick to be angry. And the words are such a part of that. When our power, not all of us are violent people physically, but we are certainly violent with our words. Man, have you ever had that? Really, I'm finally going to tell them off. I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. Pardon me while I rant. Those words, they're things that have malice, and they are designed to not only vent our own displeasure, but sometimes, man, if we're really lucky, not only will we tell how angry we are, but maybe I'll hurt somebody who made me angry. And maybe sometimes we use those words, often we use those words in place of violence, in place of physical violence, or they often lead to violence. They're words that have malice buried deep within them, wanting to hurt somebody else. And then there's just harsh words. I love that that's kind of thrown in. Just harsh words. Really let them have it. Even if your complaint, even if your statement is true, there is a rough, a raspy, when I hear about harsh words, I think of like the file, your rasp that you use in woodworking that just is harsh and bumpy, and it tears it apart. It's pain. It's meant to cause pain and humiliate rather than change. Harsh words rarely ever make the situation better. And then it wraps up talking about bad words that are slander. Lies or even truth about someone that is meant to lower their reputation or their standing in society. And what is that called? When we slander someone, even if we're saying something that's true, we know when our motive is we want to bring them down a notch. And we want everyone to see what's going on with them. Sometimes in the church that's called a prayer request. Right? You know what that's called? Evil behavior. We'll wrap up bad words with Colossians 3, 8, and 9. He's like, hey, but now is the time to get rid of anger, rage, malicious behavior, slander, and dirty language. Don't lie to each other, for you've stripped off the old sinful nature and all its wicked deeds. Dirty language, profane and earthy words. Just things that are right down in the dirt. Profanity, that's where the swears come in. And lies, untruths. We tell lies to cover ourselves, to denigrate another, or somehow manipulate situations. We want to deceive and hide our shame. And out of it comes almost every single time lies come out of shame and fear. We want to make ourselves look better than we are, and we want to hide our failures. And we can do that by lying about somebody else to make them look bad. Or lie to cover up what we failed at rather than be honest. And we're already supposed to have stripped that off. They say, once you know Christ, once you're living with Christ, that stuff is supposed to come off. Our insides are no longer match our outsides. That our insides have been changed. We're a new creature. And that our outsides need to match that. And that takes time, like a snake sloughing off its skin. And we have to continually be working on that. And if that's happening, we need to correct and deal with our inside. If we find bad words coming out, we need to look on where's that coming from. Those words are wicked deeds that lead to wicked actions. So just a few thoughts. How we speak and how we use our words is powerful. It can be a force for so much damage and pain and push people away from us and each other and from God when we use bad words. We need to remember that what we truly think comes out in our words. One of my favorite apologies, one of my favorite mea culpas that we hear in the public sector so often is, that's not the real me. When I said those things, that's not the real me. The reality is, no, that was the real you, right? We can confess that. We can own up to that. We can admit that. Fortunately, as believers, we can be forgiven for that, and we can change. But what is really inside of us, what we think of others, what we think of ourselves, what we think of God, is what comes out in our words. To puff up or to tear down. The old adage from, I learned this way back, man, I was like the first generation to be taught computer programming in school. We did BASIC on a TRS-80, or high quality Radio Shack computers. I think they were diesel. And the thing we were taught is garbage in, garbage out. If something's wrong with your program, if it's doing the wrong thing, it's because you wrote something wrong. There's something wrong in the program. And the same thing for us. If we fill ourselves with just that kind of bad words and bitterness and anger and rage and fear and denigration, and right, what is going to come out of our mouths? What is going to come out of us? Bad words. Things that we will say to others about somebody else. Rarely, I think, in our society, we don't really kind of go out and just go after somebody directly. Maybe behind the keyboard, but usually the damage that we do is talking to somebody else about the third person. That's bad language, especially when we're angry. Have you ever just gone off and said something when you were angry and it felt good in that moment? How long did that feel good? How long did that feel good? Did you ever go, like the next day, I'm really glad I did that. That was a great thing for me to do, to just lay into that waitress. I'm proud of myself. No. I was talking to somebody else. I think technology is great. I love it. But one of the things that it's allowed us to do is stand back, and when we have a conflict, we're lobbing grenades at each other rather than wrestling. There's something real about, we're going to be face to face and we're going to talk about this and maybe deal with some issues and maybe even disagree and sometimes even get emotional. But the reality, we're right there with each other. It's so much easier now just to stand behind your wall and lob grenades and not see the result of it. I also think that bad language can be those people who just always have something negative to say. I have to admit, I catch myself in that sometimes. Life is hard. There's struggles. There's difficulty around us. But I don't want to be one of those people who just every time you're around me, I'll say, you're having a great day? Yeah, but it's probably going to rain tomorrow. Right? Oh, it's so sunny. Yeah, but it brings the bugs out. There's just always something like that. You want $1 million. Yeah, I got to pay taxes on it. That stuff. People are just negative, looking for what to hate. And then they enjoy the pleasure of sharing that with you. We need to speak truth. Don't deceive others to make ourselves look good. I'm going to throw this last little pet peeve and then move on. It's that I just tell it like it is, people. They're telling the truth, honest often, that's the true adjustment, but I just call it as I see it. You notice that the only thing that they ever see when they're calling it is negative stuff? It's always, I just call it like I see it and that guy's a jerk. Or I just call it like I see it and you're a failure. You never hear, I just call it like I see it and you are sweet and kind and I just want to give you a big old hug. I call it like I see it, this is the way it is. You are a generous, wonderful person and people like to be around you. Sometimes when we're just saying it like it is, when we're just being honest, it's slander. It's meant to hurt. We'll talk about maybe how to do that better in the next section. The point of bad words is to make myself feel better at the expense of others. Or maybe even maybe just disregarding others. So how do we deal with that? Let's do a couple things. Let's examine my words and how they affect people. Talk to yourself first. Have you ever done that? I used to say when I was a high school teacher, I'd tell my students, here's my only rule, don't be dumb. Ask yourself, is the thing I'm about to say or do dumb? If it is, don't do that. So talk to yourself first. If you feel like saying something or typing something, say it and think, how is this going to affect others? Who is this helping? Is this meant to hurt and make me feel better? Is that the only result of this? Is I'm going to feel better and a whole bunch of other people are going to feel bad? Then don't say it. Let's be people who avoid and catch ourselves when we're always being negative. When we see the negative first and we like to share that and spread that around. I think that bad words create a feedback loop. That we say something bad, we say bad stuff, others hear it and are brought down and they feel bad. Their inner man is hurt and defeated. And then they communicate that same feeling and say bad words, and then we're around it and it tears us down and our inner man is depleted and hurt. And then we feel bad and we want to release, so we say something bad and it spirals down and down and down. But fortunately there's hope. There are also beautiful words. These are words that aid and uplift the marginalized and those who are in need and those weaker than us. They are words that we could imagine Jesus saying. We'll do this quickly. The second part of Ephesians 4:29. Ephesians 4:29b. Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. Good, just advantageous, that they would be right, they would be morally right and uplifting, that the things that come out of our mouth that were started in our soul, started in our spirit, started in our inner man, that which overflows is focused on finding the positive and helping somebody else. It is helpful. I love that it's useful, ready to assist. One commentator said that the idea is that it's words that show that we are ready to assist. There are people like that in this room. I got to admit, sometimes I'm preaching the choir a little bit, but it's easy for us to get caught up, especially online, with some negative stuff. But I think this group, you ever know those people who, anything you ever bring up, they're like, how can I help with that? Truths that assist others to live better and come closer to Jesus. That's the words that are helpful. They provide information and encouragement for someone else to grow closer to God. And they are encouraging, they're positive. I think the key to encouragement is something that is hopeful, that helps us see the future and realize that we are not only doomed, that there is hope. If we continue, encourages us, exhorts us to continue walking, continuing to get closer, not just attaboys, not just small words of, hey, good job, but I mean moments that are truly insightful and genuinely helpful, backed up often by tangible help. By resources of time. And those things that support our walk with God. And I'll even throw this in at the end of that. It says, hey, that's how you should talk to everyone. Strangers, friends, family. I got to admit, sometimes I've failed in this, that I'm really nice to strangers, but I'm not so nice to my family and the people that already know me. Sometimes even I'm callous because I'm like, oh, they know I don't mean it. I don't want to be like that anymore. To remember to build up. Ephesians 4:32, instead of the bad words, instead be kind to each other, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ Jesus has forgiven you. Kind. Being generous and helpful. Thinking of others first, looking out for what the hearer is hearing. What do they need right now? And how can I say this in a kind way? Something that is sweet. And not just to the person, but about others. If you ever have in conversation have to say, hey, don't tell this to anybody else, that might be a red flag. There are times that's appropriate, sure. You're sharing something personal or you've been given permission or it's, right? But oftentimes when we say that, we're afraid that it's going to get back to that person. Something that is kind. My favorite phrase, I love this, tender-hearted. The opposite of hard-hearted. This is willing to feel for another and be thoughtful of their feelings and understanding. So often today, the idea is, hey, this is just the truth, and if you can't take it, you're weak. Jesus always said, hey, be tenderhearted. Worry about how they feel. Worry about how it comes across. Make sure you hone it and think about it and make it appropriate that will build them up and not damage them. Empathy is good. There's a couple of Christian authors who have come out with books and articles about why empathy is bad. We need to quit worrying about how people feel. Jesus worried about how people felt. He told the truth, but he was tender-hearted. He was kind. Sympathy and empathy are good. Jesus is the greatest example of empathy ever. He went from God, as we talked about in Philippians, right? He went from being God to being one of us. He wanted to completely and fully empathize with our experience. It should grieve us if we cause someone else pain rather than make us feel tough. And then he says we should forgive each other, center on forgiveness. Good words or beautiful words are ones that focus on and express the forgiveness we've experienced from God and as we forgive others. Colossians 4:4-6. Pray that I will proclaim the message as clearly as I should. Live wisely among those who are not believers and make the most of every opportunity. What does that mean? Let your conversation be gracious and attractive so that you will have the right response for everyone. I used to think and was trained that having the right response meant I knew every Bible verse and every theological and doctrinal argument for anything somebody brought up. I would be able to counter it and they would go, you know what, you're right, I have to believe in God now. No, he's talking about, hey, taking the most of every opportunity and having the right response means understanding the person you're talking to and making it gentle and attractive and clear. That's the right response. Showing what God is really like. Words to clarify the good news. When we share the good news, make sure it's good news and not just pointy, angry news. Beautiful words communicate the character of God. Let me say that again. Beautiful words communicate the character of God. What is that? Yes, holy, but loving and forgiving and gracious and patient and kind. And the best way to communicate that is expressing how we have experienced the forgiveness and love and grace of God. And I would throw this out too, for especially this congregation, this group, myself included. It can be as recent as possible. If we can say, you know what, when I was 24, I met Jesus and he changed my life. Since then, I've kind of still been the same. Since then, I haven't really had a lot of encounters with Jesus. Let's be in a place where we can always say it's overflowing from our daily life. I'm working with Jesus. I've experienced his forgiveness today. I've experienced his grace today. Wise as we see opportunity to share what's true. The wisdom of knowing what words need to be said. We need to understand, beautiful words understand the hearer and make sure that they understand. The same words can be beautiful in one situation and bad in another. The best example of this, I think, from a very holy source is from the TV show Arrested Development. There's a point in that show where one of the characters is attacked by a wild seal and they take him to the hospital. And the whole family is gathered outside of the hospital room. And the doctor comes out and says, he's going to be all right. And everyone breathes a sigh of relief. Oh, and he goes, wow, I can't believe you're taking this so good. And they go, like, wait, what do you mean? And he goes, yeah, that the seal bit off his left hand, so now he's going to be all right. Thanks. I love how that took a while to ripple across the room. We need to be clear and careful of the words. Sometimes what worked in one situation, one conversation, is not kind and gentle and helpful in another situation. That's the clarity and wisdom we need. This happens when I'm in my recovery group. Oftentimes people are like, you need to share about Jesus. Absolutely. But let's get them off heroin first. Let's talk about forgiveness first. Let's talk about how they've made a mess of their lives and it's hopeful rather than, yeah, and you're also a sinner. Did I tell you that? We need to be gracious and have attractive conversations with people and around people. What is attractive about it? I love this idea that not only is it about the people I'm talking to, but other people seeing that interaction, other people hearing about that interaction, other people around that person could go, you know what, that is not what I expected of a Christian. I expected pointing and shouting and condemnation, and this person was kind and gentle and patient. Their words were beautiful. That's the reputation I want us to have. How we speak and the words we use are powerful. It can be a force for such good and healing. They can encourage and build up, and they can heal. We can share how we have been healed, how God has taken us from a negative place and brought us to a positive place, has worked on us, and we can share that with others and offer healing words that counteract sometimes the things that they've been told their whole life, how they were dumb and stupid and outsiders and they'd never make it. And we can offer words of hope and grace and forgiveness and acceptance to heal the damage. Sometimes those words rattle for years, and we get to be a part of helping them erase those old tapes and listen to some new tapes brought by Jesus Christ. We can communicate forgiveness and kindness and gentleness and empathy. Beautiful words coming out of our mouth are a sign of growth. I'm sorry, I'm going late. So let's talk to ourselves first. Think about who's listening. Am I saying this to build up, to help, to encourage, or am I saying this just to make me feel better? I'll say this too, in the middle of that. Sometimes the most beautiful words are the ones unspoken. Actually listening to somebody else, paying attention, giving them our time, being patient before we jump in and say something. I will communicate. This is absolutely 100% true. When I have counseling, when people want to come talk to me, my prayer beforehand is not give me the right thing to say, but it's, Lord, help me to shut up and let them talk. And then if you prompt me, help me to say something if it's genuinely helpful. Point out the positive. Forgive and seek forgiveness. I'll leave us with this. Be a good gossip. Talk about other people positively. Hey, you hear about Sherry? She is fantastic and so kind. Right? Amen. Thanks. Yeah. So what we say comes from our inner self, and we must tend to that to ensure that what overflows out of our mouths are good. Think of others first. This helps them and helps me. It brings us to more in line with the way of Christ. I read an article this morning, and then we'll be done. Sometimes when I think about words, I've started saying I love you to my kids. I started this years ago anytime we left the room, or when they leave. Now that they're adults, one of my favorite things is one of his friends going, you have an interesting relationship with your dad. I go, why? He goes, because you laugh about really weird stuff, and you kind of make fun of each other, and then you both say I love you right after. Because I thought, you know what, if I were to die, I want the last words that come out of my mouth to be something positive. I want them to be beautiful words. I read this article of a hospice care nurse talking about things people say when they're passing, things they regret. She said, one person said, I shouldn't have spent so much energy on negative emotions and hatred. The things that made me angry and now seem completely trivial, and I wish I had spent my time being more happy and positive in life. That's what should come out of our mouth. So we'll leave us with this benediction. Proverbs 10:32 says this, the lips of the godly speak helpful words, but the mouth of the wicked speaks perverse words. May we be people who refrain from abusive and angry words, but are instead known for encouraging, kind, and beautiful words that draw people together and bring them to know the love and grace of Jesus. Thank you so much. Thank you for putting up with all this today, and we will see you